The coffee shop buzzed with the usual morning crowd when Maya Chen walked through the glass doors, her worn military jacket barely noticeable among the business suits and casual wear. At 28, she had learned to blend into civilian life, though the disciplined way she carried herself and the alert scanning of her eyes betrayed her military background. Few people in this upscale Denver neighborhood knew that the quiet woman who ordered the same black coffee every Tuesday had spent 6 years in the Army, including 3 deployments that had tested every fiber of her being. Maya had been medically discharged 8 months ago after an IED explosion in Afghanistan left her with a pronounced limp and invisible wounds that ran much deeper. The transition to civilian life had proven more challenging than any mission she had ever undertaken. The Veterans Affairs Office visits, the job interviews where her military experience seemed more like a liability than an asset, and the sleepless nights when the sounds of the city reminded her of distant explosions had all taken their toll. She found her usual corner table and opened her laptop, scrolling through job listings with the same methodical approach she had once used to plan military operations. The small disability check barely covered her modest apartment rent, and her savings were dwindling faster than she cared to calculate. Despite her impressive military record, which included a Bronze Star for valor and commendations for leadership under fire, civilian employers seemed hesitant to take a chance on someone they viewed as potentially unstable or difficult to manage. The morning proceeded like countless others until a commotion near the entrance caught her attention. A man in an expensive suit was berating the young barista, his voice rising with each word. The teenager behind the counter had apparently gotten his order wrong, and what should have been a minor inconvenience had escalated into something far more serious. "You incompetent little brat," the man shouted, his face red with anger. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire place and have you fired before lunch." The other customers shifted uncomfortably, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming an ugly scene. The barista, who couldn't have been more than 17, stood frozen with tears forming in her eyes. Maya watched the situation unfold with the same tactical awareness that had kept her alive overseas. She noticed the man's aggressive posture, the way he had positioned himself to intimidate the much smaller teenager, and how the other customers seemed paralyzed by the unexpected confrontation. Her military training had taught her to assess threats quickly and respond appropriately, but civilian life had also taught her that intervention often led to complications she couldn't afford. The man suddenly reached across the counter and grabbed the girl's wrist, his grip tight enough to make her cry out in pain. "Maybe a little physical reminder will help you remember to do your job properly," he snarled, his voice carrying the cold tone of someone accustomed to using power to get his way. That was the moment Maya's military instincts overrode her civilian caution. She had seen enough bullies in her life, from the schoolyard to the battlefield, and she had sworn long ago never to stand by while someone abused their power over the defenseless. Without conscious thought, she rose from her chair and moved toward the counter with the smooth, purposeful stride of someone trained for confrontation. "Sir, I think you need to let her go," Maya said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. Her posture was relaxed but ready, the stance of someone who had faced far more dangerous opponents than an angry businessman in a coffee shop. The man turned toward her with a sneer, clearly expecting another intimidated customer who would back down at the first sign of aggression. Instead, he found himself looking into the steady gray eyes of someone who had stared down armed insurgents and emerged victorious. "This is none of your business, lady. Go back to your coffee and mind your own affairs." Maya stepped closer, her movement calculated to position herself between the man and the terrified barista. "Actually, it became my business the moment you put your hands on someone who can't defend herself. Let her go, apologize, and leave. We can all pretend this never happened." The man's grip tightened on the girl's wrist, and his free hand moved toward Maya in what she immediately recognized as the beginning of an assault. Her training kicked in automatically, muscle memory from countless hours of combat practice guiding her response. In one fluid motion, she caught his wrist, applied pressure to a specific nerve point, and forced him to release the barista while simultaneously stepping into a defensive position that would allow her to control any further aggression. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" the man shouted, more surprised than hurt by the speed and efficiency of her intervention. "Do you have any idea who you're messing with? I'm Marcus Whitfield. I own half the commercial real estate in this city, and I have connections that go all the way to Washington. Maya had heard similar threats before, usually from local power brokers in Afghanistan who thought their influence could intimidate American soldiers. She had learned long ago that bullies, regardless of their wealth or position, typically folded when faced with someone who refused to be intimidated. I don't care if you own the entire state, Mr. Whitfield. You don't have the right to assault anyone, regardless of your bank account. The situation might have escalated further, but the arrival of 3 other customers changed the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Maya had noticed them earlier, sitting at a table near the window, but had dismissed them as typical business professionals having a morning meeting. Now, as they approached the counter, something about their bearing and the way they moved suggested a familiarity with command that transcended civilian occupations. The first man to reach them was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. He was followed by a woman with short-cropped hair and an athletic build that spoke of continued physical conditioning well into middle age. The third member of their group was younger, but carried himself with the same unmistakable confidence that marked career military officers. "Is there a problem here?" the silver-haired man asked, his voice carrying the kind of natural authority that made people instinctively straighten their posture. Marcus Whitfield, still angry but beginning to sense that the situation had shifted in ways he didn't understand, turned to face what he assumed would be additional witnesses to his humiliation. "This woman assaulted me," he declared, pointing at Maya while trying to reassert control of the narrative. "I was simply trying to correct a service issue, and she physically attacked me. I demand that someone call the police immediately." Maya remained silent, her training having taught her that sometimes the best response to false accusations was to let them collapse under their own weight. She had learned in military tribunals that rushing to defend yourself often created the impression of guilt, while calm confidence in the truth usually spoke louder than any words. The 3 newcomers exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes without a single spoken word. The woman stepped forward slightly, her eyes taking in Maya's posture, the way she had positioned herself, and the subtle signs that marked her as someone with military training. "Ma'am, could you tell us what happened here?" Maya's response was brief and factual, delivered in the same tone she had once used to brief commanding officers on mission outcomes. "The gentleman grabbed the employee's wrist and was causing her distress. I asked him to release her and leave. When he refused and made a move toward me, I used minimal force to ensure the safety of everyone involved." Marcus Whitfield's face reddened further at what he perceived as Maya's understated version of events. "Minimal force? She grabbed my wrist like some kind of trained killer. I wouldn't be surprised if she's some kind of mental case with PTSD who shouldn't be allowed in public." The comment hit Maya like a physical blow, striking at the very insecurities she battled every day. The stigma surrounding veterans with PTSD had cost her job opportunities and social relationships, and hearing it used as a weapon in public felt like being attacked all over again. For a moment, the confident facade she had maintained threatened to crack, replaced by the vulnerability that she worked so hard to hide. But before she could respond, something extraordinary happened. The silver-haired man stepped forward, came to attention with military precision, and rendered a perfect salute. "General Patricia Morrison, United States Army, retired," he said formally. "It's an honor to meet you, Sergeant Chen." Maya's eyes widened in shock. She had never seen this man before in her life, yet somehow he knew not only her name but her rank. Before she could process what was happening, the woman also stepped forward and saluted. "General Sarah Rodriguez, United States Air Force, retired. Your service record speaks for itself, Sergeant." The third member of their group, who Maya now realized was younger than she had initially thought, also rendered a salute. "General Michael Thompson, United States Marines, retired. What we just witnessed was a soldier protecting civilians, Mr. Whitfield, something you clearly wouldn't understand." The coffee shop fell completely silent. Even the espresso machine seemed to quiet as every customer stared at the unprecedented scene unfolding before them. Maya, still processing the surreal turn of events, automatically returned the salutes with military precision, her body responding to ingrained training even as her mind struggled to comprehend what was happening. Marcus Whitfield looked around the room as if seeking support, but found only disapproving stares and the uncomfortable silence of people who had just witnessed his complete humiliation. The three generals maintained their positions, creating a wall of military authority that made his earlier threats seem petty and meaningless. "This is ridiculous," he finally sputtered, but the bluster was gone from his voice. "You can't possibly expect me to believe that three generals just happened to be having coffee when this incident occurred. This is some kind of setup." General Morrison's voice carried the weight of decades of command when he responded. "Mr. Whitfield, what you've witnessed today is something that happens more often than you might think. Veterans recognize each other, and we look out for our own. Sergeant Chen served with distinction in Afghanistan, earned a Bronze Star for valor, and has continued to serve her community with the same dedication she showed her country." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes, not from shame or fear, but from the overwhelming relief of being recognized and supported by people who understood what she had been through. For months, she had felt invisible in civilian society, defined by her limitations rather than her accomplishments. To have her service acknowledged publicly, especially in the face of such cruel accusations, felt like a validation she had desperately needed. The young barista, who had been forgotten during the confrontation, finally found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered to Maya, her gratitude evident despite her tears. "He was really hurting me, and nobody else was doing anything to help." General Rodriguez turned to address the other customers in the coffee shop, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is an example of the courage and selflessness that defines our military veterans. Sergeant Chen saw someone in distress and acted to protect them, just as she protected her fellow soldiers overseas. The suggestion that her service-related injuries make her a danger to society is not only ignorant but offensive to everyone who has sacrificed for this country." Marcus Whitfield, realizing that any further argument would only deepen his humiliation, backed toward the door. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the threat lacked any real conviction. As he reached the exit, General Thompson's voice stopped him. "Mr. Whitfield, I suggest you use this experience as an opportunity for reflection. True strength isn't found in intimidating teenagers or belittling veterans. It's found in protecting those who need protection and honoring those who have served something greater than themselves." As the door closed behind the retreating businessman, the coffee shop gradually returned to its normal rhythm. Customers resumed their conversations, though many continued to glance toward the group at the counter. The barista, whose name tag identified her as Emma, began preparing fresh drinks with hands that no longer shook. Maya found herself surrounded by the three generals, who had relaxed their formal postures but maintained the circle of support they had created around her. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice still uncertain. "How did you know who I was?" General Morrison smiled, the expression transforming his stern features into something warmer and more grandfatherly. "Sergeant Chen, when you've spent as many years in the military as we have, you develop an eye for recognizing fellow veterans. The way you assessed the situation, positioned yourself, and handled the threat told us everything we needed to know about your training and character." "But you knew my name, my rank, my service record," Maya pressed, still struggling to understand the coincidence that had just saved her from what could have been a humiliating and potentially legal situation. General Rodriguez exchanged a glance with her companions before answering. "Sergeant Chen, what happened here today wasn't entirely coincidental. We've been looking for you." Maya stared at General Rodriguez, her mind racing to process the implications of those words. "Looking for me? I don't understand. I've been medically discharged. My service is over." The confusion in her voice was evident, mixed with a wariness that had been born from months of disappointment and rejection. General Thompson gestured toward the table where they had been sitting. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private. What we have to discuss requires discretion." His tone carried the suggestion of classified matters, something Maya recognized from her years of handling sensitive military information. As they moved to the corner booth, Maya noticed that other customers had begun to disperse, though several lingered near the counter, clearly hopping to overhear more of the conversation. Emma, the young barista, caught Maya's eye and mouthed, "Thank you," once more before returning to her duties with a smile that hadn't been there before the incident. Settled in the booth, General Morrison leaned forward slightly, his voice lowered but still carrying the authority that had commanded respect for decades. "Sergeant Chen, your medical discharge doesn't diminish the value of your skills or experience. In fact, It's precisely because of your unique background that we've been seeking you out. Maya's defensive posture didn't relax. Sir, with respect, I've heard similar words from VA counselors and job placement services. They all talk about the value of military experience right before they explain why no one wants to hire someone with PTSD and mobility issues. The bitterness in her voice reflected months of false promises and dashed hopes. This is different, General Rodriguez interjected firmly. We're not here to offer you sympathy or false encouragement. We're here because we have a problem that requires someone with your specific combination of skills, experience, and character. Someone who has proven they can operate effectively under pressure and make difficult decisions when lives are at stake. The conversation was interrupted when Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and her face paled slightly. "Excuse me, but I need to take care of something." She started to rise from the table, but General Thompson placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Is it related to the incident that just occurred?" he asked, his experience reading people evident in the concern that crossed his features. Maya hesitated before answering. "Mr. Whitfield apparently wasn't finished. He's filed a complaint with the police, claiming I assaulted him. There's a patrol car outside my apartment building right now." She looked around the table at the three generals, suddenly understanding that their support might have legal complications she hadn't considered. General Morrison pulled out his phone with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing crises. "Officer Jackson, this is General Morrison. I need to speak with whoever is handling the complaint filed by Marcus Whitfield this morning." He paused, listening to the response. "Yes, I'll hold." Maya watched in amazement as the general handled what she assumed would be a career-ending legal problem with a few phone calls. Within minutes, he had connected with the responding officers, provided witness statements from all three generals, and arranged for the coffee shop's security footage to be reviewed immediately. "The matter is resolved," he announced after ending the call. "The officers have viewed the security footage, which clearly shows Mr. Whitfield initiating physical contact and you responding with appropriate defensive measures. The complaint has been withdrawn, and there's now a note in the system about Mr. Whitfield's tendency toward false accusations." General Rodriguez studied Maya's expression as the relief washed over her features. "Sergeant Chen, what you've experienced today is unfortunately common for veterans transitioning to civilian life. People like Whitfield prey on those they perceive as vulnerable, using the legal system and social prejudice as weapons. But what happened here also demonstrates something important about the military community. We look out for each other," General Thompson continued the thought. "Active duty, retired, discharged, it doesn't matter. When a veteran needs support, we provide it. But we also expect something in return. We expect you to continue serving in whatever capacity your situation allows." Maya leaned back in the booth, studying the faces of the three generals who had just completely altered the trajectory of her day. "What kind of service are you talking about? I can barely handle civilian job interviews, let alone military operations." General Morrison smiled at her directness. "Sergeant Chen, your military record indicates that you served in psychological operations before your combat deployment. You specialized in understanding human behavior, predicting responses to various stimuli, and developing strategies to influence outcomes through nonviolent means. Those skills didn't disappear when you were discharged." The mention of her specialized training brought back memories that Maya had tried to bury. Her work in psychological operations had involved analyzing terrorist networks, understanding recruitment patterns, and developing counter-narratives to extremist propaganda. It had been intellectually challenging work that utilized her psychology degree alongside her military training. "That was different," she said quietly. "I was working as part of a team with extensive support systems and clear command structures. Out here, I can't even convince an employer to take a chance on me for basic administrative work." General Rodriguez leaned forward, her expression serious. "What if I told you that the problems you've been facing aren't random? What if there was a systematic effort to prevent certain veterans from finding meaningful employment, particularly those with specialized knowledge that could be valuable to foreign intelligence services?" Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you suggesting that my employment problems are the result of espionage activities?" "We're suggesting that your situation, along with those of several hundred other discharged veterans, fits a pattern that has attracted the attention of multiple intelligence agencies. General Thompson explained. Veterans with backgrounds in psychological operations, intelligence analysis, and special operations have been experiencing unusually high rates of employment discrimination, financial hardship, and social isolation. The implications of what they were suggesting began to sink in. Maya had assumed her struggles were personal failures, the result of her own limitations, and the general prejudice against veterans with mental health issues. The possibility that she had been targeted as part of a larger operation was both terrifying and oddly reassuring. General Morrison continued the briefing with the precision of someone who had delivered countless intelligence assessments. The pattern was first noticed by VA counselors who found it suspicious that so many highly qualified veterans were struggling to find work despite having skills that should have been in high demand. Further investigation revealed that many of these veterans had been approached by individuals offering lucrative overseas consulting opportunities. Consulting work that would have taken them to countries with significant intelligence operations targeting the United States, General Rodriguez added. When these veterans refused these offers, they found their employment prospects in the United States mysteriously drying up. Maya thought back over the past 8 months, remembering the strange job interviews where she had been rejected despite being clearly overqualified, and the mysterious consulting firm that had contacted her about opportunities in Eastern Europe. At the time, she had dismissed the overseas offer as potentially dangerous work that wasn't suitable for someone with her medical limitations. "The consulting firm," she said slowly. "They contacted me 3 times, each time with more money and better benefits. When I told them I wasn't interested in overseas work, they said they understood and would keep my information on file for domestic opportunities. But those domestic opportunities never materialized." General Thompson nodded grimly. "That's consistent with the pattern we've identified. The consulting firm serves as a front for foreign intelligence recruitment. Veterans who refuse the overseas positions find themselves blacklisted from legitimate employment opportunities through a sophisticated network of influence and intimidation." "But how is that possible?" Maya asked. "How could foreign agents have that kind of influence over American businesses?" General Rodriguez's expression darkened. "Sergeant Chen, you've been out of the intelligence community for 8 months, but during that time, the landscape has changed dramatically. Foreign intelligence services have become much more sophisticated in their approach to targeting American military personnel. They're not just looking for active-duty soldiers anymore. They're systematically targeting discharged veterans who might be vulnerable due to financial hardship or social isolation." The conversation was interrupted when Maya's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her expression grew puzzled. "It's my landlord. I told him I'd have this month's rent by Friday, but it's only Tuesday." She answered the call, her side of the conversation audible to the 3 generals. "Hello, Mr. Patterson. What do you mean, paid in full? I haven't made any payments yet this month." She listened for a moment, her confusion evident. "Someone paid 6 months in advance. That's impossible. I haven't asked anyone for help, and I certainly haven't authorized any payments." General Morrison was already reaching for his phone as Maya ended the call. "Mr. Patterson, this is General Morrison. I need you to tell me exactly who made that payment and how it was processed." His tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to getting immediate answers to security-related questions. Maya watched in growing alarm as the general's expression became increasingly grim during the phone conversation. When he hung up, the 3 generals exchanged looks that spoke of serious security concerns. "Sergeant Chen, the payment was made by wire transfer from an account that Mr. Patterson believes belongs to a property management company called International Housing Solutions. The payment included a note saying it was made on your behalf due to your outstanding service to international clients." Maya felt her stomach drop. "I've never heard of that company, and I certainly never authorized anyone to pay my rent. This has to be some kind of mistake." General Thompson was already typing on his phone, running the company name through what Maya assumed were intelligence databases. "International Housing Solutions doesn't exist as a legitimate business entity," he announced after a few minutes. "But the name has appeared in connection with several other veterans who have experienced similar, mysterious financial assistance." "They're trying to compromise you," General Rodriguez stated bluntly. "The pattern is clear. First, they make it impossible for you to find legitimate employment. Then, when you're facing financial crisis, they provide assistance that creates the appearance of impropriety. Later, they can use that assistance as leverage to pressure you into actual cooperation. Maya realized that what had seemed like a series of random setbacks over the past 8 months had actually been a coordinated campaign designed to isolate and manipulate her. The employment rejections, the financial pressure, and now the mysterious rent payment were all part of a sophisticated operation targeting her specifically. "But why me?" she asked. "There are thousands of veterans with similar backgrounds. What makes me worth this kind of effort?" General Morrison's answer was sobering. "Sergeant Chen, your psychological operations work in Afghanistan wasn't just about analyzing enemy behavior. You were part of a classified program that developed new methods for detecting and countering foreign influence operations. The techniques you helped develop are now being used to protect American elections, business networks, and social media platforms from manipulation." The weight of what he was saying began to settle over Maya. Her work had been classified far above her clearance level, and she had only understood small pieces of the larger program. But apparently, those pieces were valuable enough to justify an extensive foreign intelligence operation designed to either recruit or neutralize her. General Rodriguez leaned forward, her voice taking on the urgency of someone delivering a critical mission briefing. "Sergeant Chen, we need your help to stop this operation before it compromises more veterans. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe while we figure out how deeply you've been infiltrated." Maya looked around the coffee shop, suddenly seeing it with new eyes. The customers who had lingered after the incident with Whitfield, the barista who had been unusually friendly, even the timing of her regular Tuesday morning routine all took on potentially sinister implications. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked, voicing the question that had been building throughout their conversation. "How do I know this entire encounter isn't part of the same operation?" General Thompson reached into his jacket and pulled out a credential case that he opened just long enough for Maya to see official government identification. "Because, Sergeant Chen, we work for the people who are trying to stop the operation that's been targeting you. And as of today, so do you." Maya stared at the credentials General Thompson had briefly displayed, her mind racing through the implications of what she was being told. The identification had looked authentic, but her psychological operations training had taught her that sophisticated intelligence operations often used genuine credentials obtained through infiltration or corruption. "If you're really who you say you are," she said carefully, "then you'll understand why I need more proof than a flash of identification. Anyone targeting veterans with my background would know that we're trained to verify authority before accepting mission assignments." General Morrison smiled approvingly at her response. "Outstanding, Sergeant Chen. Your caution is exactly why we've been looking for you. Most people would have been overwhelmed by the revelations about the operation targeting them, but you're still thinking tactically." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet computer. "I'm going to show you something that will prove our legitimacy, but I need your word that this information will remain classified regardless of your decision about helping us." Maya nodded, recognizing the familiar rhythm of a classified briefing. General Morrison activated the tablet and turned it toward her, revealing what appeared to be an official Department of Defense intelligence assessment. The document header showed classification markings she recognized from her previous work, and the content began with her own military photograph and service record. "Operation Shepherd's Watch," General Rodriguez explained as Maya read through the document. "A joint task force created 6 months ago to investigate and counter foreign intelligence operations targeting discharged American military personnel. You are one of 47 veterans who have been identified as specific targets of a recruitment and compromise campaign." The document contained details about Maya's service that were not part of her official military record, including classified assessments of her psychological operations work and evaluations of her potential value to foreign intelligence services. Even more disturbing were surveillance reports documenting the systematic sabotage of her employment opportunities and the gradual isolation tactics that had been employed against her. "This is impossible," Maya whispered as she read through months of her life documented from an outside perspective. "How could this operation have been running for so long without being detected?" General Thompson leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had personally investigated these activities. "Because it was designed to exploit weaknesses in our support systems for discharged veterans. The perpetrators understood that veterans struggling with PTSD and employment discrimination would be unlikely to report suspicious activities, especially if those activities could be explained as bad luck or personal failings. Maya continued reading through the intelligence assessment, finding detailed profiles of other veterans who had been targeted by the same operation. Many of their stories mirrored her own experience almost exactly. Mysterious employment difficulties followed by overseas consulting offers, financial pressure relieved by anonymous assistance, and gradual social isolation that made them increasingly dependent on contact from their potential handlers. "How many veterans have been successfully recruited?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. General Rodriguez's expression was grim. 14 confirmed recruitments over the past 18 months, all of them veterans with specialized knowledge in intelligence analysis, psychological operations, or special weapon systems. Several have already been deployed to overseas locations where they're providing services that directly support activities hostile to American interests. The scope of what they were describing began to sink in. This wasn't just an intelligence operation targeting individual veterans. It was a systematic campaign designed to weaponize America's own military expertise against the country. Veterans who had sworn to defend the Constitution were being manipulated into supporting foreign intelligence services through a combination of financial desperation and sophisticated psychological manipulation. Maya closed the tablet and looked around the coffee shop again, now understanding that her morning routine had likely been under surveillance for weeks or months. What happened today with Whitfield? Was that part of the operation too? General Morrison shook his head. No, that was genuinely coincidental. Whitfield is just a local businessman with anger management issues and an inflated sense of his own importance. But your response to that situation is exactly why we've been hopping to recruit you for Operation Shepherd's Watch. My response? Maya was confused. I just did what anyone should do when they see someone being abused. Exactly, General Thompson said emphatically. You saw someone in trouble and acted to protect them, despite knowing that intervention could have serious personal consequences for you. That moral courage, combined with your tactical skills and psychological operations background, makes you exactly the kind of person we need for this mission. General Rodriguez opened her own tablet and showed Maya a different document, this one outlining the structure and objectives of Operation Shepherd's Watch. We're not just trying to stop the recruitment campaign, Sergeant Chen. We're trying to turn it against the people who created it. That requires someone who understands both the psychological tactics being used and the mentality of the veterans being targeted. Maya studied the mission outline, recognizing the elegant simplicity of the plan. Instead of simply shutting down the recruitment operation, they intended to use it as a pathway to identify and neutralize the entire foreign intelligence network. It was a classic counterintelligence operation, but one that required someone with intimate knowledge of how the targeting process worked. You want me to become bait, she said, understanding the role they had in mind for her. You want me to appear to accept recruitment so you can trace the network back to its source. We want you to do what you do best, General Morrison corrected. Analyze the psychological profile of an adversary and develop strategies to influence their behavior. The difference is that this time, instead of working against foreign terrorists, you'll be working against foreign agents who are targeting American veterans. Maya felt a familiar stirring of purpose that she hadn't experienced since her discharge. For the first time in 8 months, someone was asking her to use her specialized skills for a mission that mattered. But she also understood the risks involved in what they were proposing. If I agree to this, what happens to my civilian life? I've been trying to build something normal, something stable. This mission could destroy any chance I have of integrating successfully into civilian society. General Rodriguez's voice was compassionate but direct. Sergeant Chen, what civilian life? The people targeting you have made sure that you don't have legitimate opportunities for normal employment or social integration. They've systematically destroyed your civilian prospects as part of their recruitment strategy. Working with us at least gives you a chance to fight back. The truth of her statement hit Maya like a physical blow. She had been clinging to the hope that her employment difficulties were temporary, that eventually her persistence would overcome the barriers she was facing. Learning that those barriers had been deliberately constructed as part of an intelligence operation meant that her hopes for a normal civilian life had been illusions all along. What about the other veterans who have been targeted? Maya asked. If this operation has been running for months, there must be people who are in even worse situations than mine. How do we help them? General Thompson's expression brightened at her question. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Part of your mission would involve identifying other targeted veterans and providing them with the support they need to resist recruitment. We've found that veterans are much more likely to trust warnings and assistance when they come from someone who has been through the same experience. Maya thought about the dozens of veterans she had encountered through VA programs and support groups, many of whom had reported similar patterns of employment discrimination and financial hardship. At the time, she had assumed their struggles were typical of the veteran experience, but now she wondered how many of them might be targets of the same recruitment operation. How would this work operationally? She asked, her military training taking over as she began to assess the mission from a tactical perspective. If I'm supposed to appear vulnerable to recruitment, I can't simultaneously be working closely with military intelligence. The people running this operation are clearly sophisticated enough to detect that kind of deception. General Morrison nodded approvingly. Your operational security concerns are valid and important. We've developed a cover story that allows you to maintain contact with our team while appearing to be exactly what your handlers expect. A struggling veteran who has been abandoned by the system and is open to alternative opportunities. He activated his tablet again and showed her a detailed identity package that had been prepared in anticipation of her recruitment. Maya Chen, freelance consultant specializing in social media analysis and public opinion research. Recently discharged veteran struggling with PTSD and employment discrimination. Currently facing eviction and financial crisis despite previous military service and college education. Maya recognized the careful crafting of a legend that was close enough to her real situation to be believable, but provided enough cover to explain future activities that might seem suspicious. It was the kind of identity construction she had helped develop for psychological operations in Afghanistan, but seeing it applied to her own life was surreal. The beauty of this cover is that it's essentially true, General Rodriguez explained. You are a struggling veteran, you do have the skills they're looking for, and you are facing financial pressures that would make overseas consulting attractive. The only difference is that instead of being genuinely desperate, you'll be working with us to gather intelligence and protect other veterans. Maya looked at the three generals who had completely transformed her understanding of her situation in the space of a single conversation. Hours ago, she had been a failed civilian struggling with depression and financial insecurity. Now, she was being offered an opportunity to return to meaningful service while striking back at the people who had been systematically destroying her life. If I do this, she said slowly, I need guarantees about what happens afterwards. I need to know that when this operation is complete, I'll have genuine opportunities for civilian employment or continued military service. I won't be abandoned again. General Thompson's response was immediate and definitive. Sergeant Chen, successful completion of this mission will result in immediate offers for permanent positions with multiple federal agencies. Your demonstrated loyalty and effectiveness will open doors that are currently closed to you. More importantly, you'll have helped protect hundreds of other veterans from the same manipulation you've endured. Maya realized that she had already made her decision. The combination of purpose, justice, and personal vindication was too compelling to resist. After months of feeling powerless and defeated, she was being offered a chance to fight back against the people who had targeted her and others like her. When do we start? She asked, her voice carrying the determination that had sustained her through multiple combat deployments. General Morrison smiled and activated a secure communication application on his tablet. We start now, Sergeant Chen. Welcome back to active service. The safe house was located in an unremarkable suburban development 20 minutes outside Denver, the kind of place where a veteran receiving disability benefits might realistically live. Maya stood in the modest living room, studying the carefully constructed environment that would serve as her base of operations for the next phase of her life. Every detail had been designed to support her cover story, while providing the technological capabilities necessary for a complex counterintelligence operation. General Rodriguez finished configuring the secure communication system that had been installed in what appeared to be a standard home office setup. Your handlers will expect you to maintain minimal electronic security, So we've designed these systems to appear as commercial-grade equipment that someone with your background might reasonably purchase for freelance consulting work. Maya examined the computer setup, noting the subtle modifications that would allow her to maintain contact with Operation Shepherd's Watch while creating the digital footprint expected of someone in her supposed situation. The system could function as a legitimate social media analysis workstation while simultaneously running classified communication protocols in the background. The timing of your recruitment approach is critical, General Thompson explained as he reviewed the operational timeline. Your handlers have been conditioning you for months, but they'll expect a specific catalyst to push you toward accepting their offer. We've arranged for several events over the next week that will create the appearance of escalating desperation. Maya studied the timeline, recognizing the psychological manipulation techniques that would be employed against her, even knowing they were part of the operation. You're going to simulate an eviction notice, rejection from my last potential employment opportunity, and a medical crisis that threatens my disability benefits. That should provide sufficient motivation for someone in my position to accept questionable overseas consulting work. General Morrison nodded approvingly. Your understanding of the psychological aspects is exactly why this operation has a chance of success. Most counterintelligence operations fail because the operatives don't truly understand the mindset of their targets. You've lived through the experience our adversaries are trying to simulate. The briefing was interrupted when Maya's phone rang with a call from an unknown number. She looked to General Rodriguez, who nodded and activated a recording device before Maya answered the call. Hello, Maya. This is Jennifer Walsh from Dynamic Solutions Consulting. We spoke several months ago about potential opportunities for veterans with your background. The voice was professionally friendly, but Maya recognized the subtle urgency that indicated her caller was working from a script designed to capitalize on perceived vulnerability. I remember, Maya replied, allowing a note of desperation to enter her voice. Is this about overseas consulting work? Because I'm afraid my situation has changed and I might be more interested in those opportunities now. I'm sorry to hear that you're facing difficulties, Jennifer Walsh said, her tone carrying practiced sympathy. As it happens, we've had several new contracts develop that might be perfect for someone with your psychological operations background. Would you be available to meet this week to discuss the details? Maya looked around the room at the three generals, all of whom were monitoring the conversation with professional intensity. Yes, I think that would be very helpful. My current circumstances have become quite challenging, and I'm open to considering options I might not have looked at before. Jennifer Walsh's voice brightened noticeably at Maya's apparent capitulation. Excellent. I'll send you an address for a meeting Thursday afternoon. These opportunities are time-sensitive, so I hope you'll be prepared to make a decision quickly if the terms are acceptable. After ending the call, Maya felt a complex mixture of anticipation and disgust. The ease with which Jennifer Walsh had moved to capitalize on her supposed desperation confirmed everything the generals had told her about the systematic nature of the recruitment operation. That was faster than we expected, General Thompson observed. They must be monitoring your situation more closely than our surveillance indicated. The fact that they called within hours of your contact with us suggests they have real-time intelligence about your activities. Maya considered the implications of what he was saying. If they're watching me that closely, they might already know about our meeting this morning. The incident with Whitfield was very public, and your intervention was witnessed by dozens of people. General Rodriguez had already anticipated this concern and was reviewing surveillance footage on her tablet. We've accounted for that possibility. The coffee shop incident actually strengthens your cover story. A veteran with PTSD who gets into a public confrontation could reasonably be expected to have increased financial and legal problems as a result. From their perspective, today's events make you an even more attractive target. General Morrison activated a wall-mounted display that showed a detailed map of Denver with multiple locations marked in different colors. Over the next 72 hours, you'll experience a carefully orchestrated series of setbacks that will reinforce the appearance that your life is spiraling out of control. Each event will be designed to increase your apparent desperation, while providing opportunities for us to observe your handler's intelligence collection methods. Maya studied the map, noting that several of the marked locations were places she had visited regularly over the past months. Her gym, her grocery store, The VA medical center, and even the coffee shop where they had met that morning were all highlighted as sites where surveillance activities had been detected. "They've been watching me everywhere," she said, feeling a chill as she realized the extent to which her privacy had been violated. "Every routine, every habit, every interaction has been cataloged and analyzed. No wonder they knew exactly how to manipulate my employment opportunities." "The thoroughness of their surveillance actually works in our favor," General Thompson explained. "Because they think they know everything about you, they'll be less likely to suspect deception when you begin behaving in ways that fit their psychological profile of a successfully compromised target." Maya moved to the window and looked out at the quiet suburban street, wondering how many of her new neighbors might be part of the extensive intelligence operation that had been built around her life. "What about after the meeting on Thursday? If I accept their recruitment offer, how quickly will they move to extract me from the country?" General Rodriguez consulted her operational notes before answering. "Based on the pattern with other successful recruitments, you'll have approximately 2 weeks between accepting their offer and departing for your overseas assignment. During that time, they'll conduct extensive background verification, provide initial training on your cover story and mission parameters, and arrange for the documentation you'll need to travel and work in the target country. 2 weeks to gather enough intelligence to justify blowing my cover and compromising the entire operation," Maya said, thinking through the tactical challenges involved. "That's not much time to identify their full network and collect evidence that would be usable in court proceedings." General Morrison's expression was serious as he addressed her concern. "Sergeant Chen, we need to be clear about the objectives and limitations of this operation. Our primary goal is to identify and neutralize the recruitment network before more veterans can be compromised. Gathering evidence for prosecution is secondary to stopping the immediate threat." Maya understood the implications of what he was telling her. This was a military operation designed to eliminate a security threat, not a law enforcement investigation intended to bring criminals to trial. The rules of engagement would be different, and the ultimate resolution might not involve traditional justice system outcomes. "What happens to the veterans who have already been recruited?" she asked. "Are we going to extract them from wherever they've been deployed, or are they considered acceptable losses?" General Thompson's voice carried the weight of someone who had made difficult decisions about acceptable casualties. "We have plans to recover the recruited veterans, but those operations will require accurate intelligence about their current locations and operational status. Your mission is critical to developing that intelligence." Maya realized that the success of her operation would determine not just the future of the recruitment network, but the fate of 14 American veterans who were currently being used as assets by foreign intelligence services. The responsibility was enormous, but it also provided additional motivation for ensuring the mission's success. The briefing was interrupted when Maya received a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Chen, this is Marcus Whitfield. I believe we may have had a misunderstanding this morning. I would like to discuss a potential business opportunity that might be mutually beneficial. Please call me at your earliest convenience." The three generals exchanged concerned looks as Maya showed them the message. "That's not a coincidence," General Rodriguez said grimly. "Whitfield's involvement suggests that your handlers have multiple approaches prepared for recruitment scenarios." Maya felt a surge of anger as she realized that even the morning's confrontation might have been orchestrated as part of the recruitment operation. "You're telling me that entire incident was staged? That man was prepared to assault a teenage girl just to create a scenario where I would reveal my military training?" "It's possible," General Morrison acknowledged. "Intelligence operations of this sophistication often include multiple contingency plans designed to capitalize on unexpected opportunities. Whitfield's sudden interest in business opportunities with you is highly suspicious given his behavior this morning." Maya looked at the phone message again, feeling manipulated in ways that went far beyond what she had previously understood. How do I respond to this without compromising the operation? General Thompson was already composing a response strategy. You respond with exactly the kind of desperate interest they would expect from someone whose life has been systematically destroyed. Whitfield represents another potential source of income, and someone in your supposed situation wouldn't be in a position to be selective about opportunities. As Maya prepared to respond to Whitfield's message, She felt the familiar sensation of stepping into a role that required her to suppress her personal feelings and focus entirely on mission objectives. It was a mental discipline she had mastered during her psychological operations work, but applying it to her own life felt surreal and disturbing. "There's something else you need to understand," General Rodriguez said as Maya prepared to make the call. "Once you begin active participation in this operation, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to return to the life you've been trying to build. Counterintelligence operations have a way of changing people permanently. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Maya considered the question seriously, thinking about the civilian life she had been struggling to create and the military identity she had been forced to abandon. The truth was that her civilian life had been largely an illusion, destroyed by the same people she was now preparing to fight. "General, with respect, the life I was trying to build was already gone. These people took it from me 8 months ago. Now I have a chance to take something from them in return." She dialed Marcus Whitfield's number, her voice taking on the tone of someone who was desperate enough to overlook previous conflicts in pursuit of financial opportunities. "Mr. Whitfield, this is Maya Chen returning your call about a business opportunity." 6 weeks later, Maya stood on the balcony of a luxury hotel in Prague, watching the ancient city spread out below her in the early morning light. To anyone observing her, she appeared to be exactly what her handlers believed her to be: a compromised American veteran now working as a psychological operations consultant for clients whose true identities remained carefully hidden behind layers of corporate shells and diplomatic immunity. The operation had progressed with a precision that both impressed and disturbed her. Every prediction made by the generals had proven accurate, from the staged financial crises that had driven her to apparent desperation, to the careful psychological conditioning that had prepared her to accept increasingly questionable assignments. Her handlers had demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of veteran psychology that could only have been developed through extensive experience with similar recruitments. Maya's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from General Rodriguez. "Package delivery confirmed. Extraction protocols active. Maintain cover for final phase." The message indicated that the intelligence she had gathered over the past month had been successfully transmitted, and that plans for her extraction were now in motion. More importantly, it confirmed that the locations and identities of the 14 previously recruited veterans had been verified and recovery operations were beginning. The journey to this point had been more challenging than anything she had experienced during her military service. Living as a double agent required constantly maintaining the psychological profile of someone whose moral compass had been corrupted by financial desperation and personal bitterness. She had been forced to participate in activities that violated her core values, including the development of propaganda materials designed to undermine American military recruitment and the analysis of social media patterns to identify potentially vulnerable veterans. But the intelligence she had gathered was extraordinary. The recruitment operation was far more extensive than Operation Shepherd's Watch had initially suspected, involving not just foreign intelligence services, but also corrupt American officials, compromised business leaders, and a network of front organizations that reached into every major American city. The scope of the infiltration was breathtaking and represented a genuine threat to national security that went far beyond the recruitment of individual veterans. Maya's handler, who had revealed himself to be a colonel in Russian military intelligence, had been impressed by her apparent enthusiasm for turning her skills against her former country. The depth of his knowledge about American military psychology and veteran culture had been disturbing, suggesting years of careful study and preparation for operations like the one that had targeted her. "Maya, you have exceeded our expectations," Colonel Volkov had told her during their final meeting the previous evening. "Your psychological profiles of American veteran communities will be invaluable for expanding our recruitment operations. We are prepared to offer you a permanent position with substantial financial compensation and the opportunity to strike back at the country that abandoned you." Maya had expressed appropriate gratitude while internally cataloging every detail of their conversation for her final intelligence report. Volkov's confidence in the operation's success had led him to reveal information about similar recruitment campaigns targeting veterans in other NATO countries, providing Operation Shepherd's Watch with intelligence that extended far beyond the original scope of their investigation. The hotel room door opened behind her, and Maya turned to see Jennifer Walsh entering with the confident stride of someone who believed herself to be in complete control of the situation. Over the past 6 weeks, Walsh had revealed herself to be a former CIA officer who had been recruited by Russian intelligence several years earlier, and now served as a primary handler for American assets. "Maya, I hope you've enjoyed Prague," Walsh said with genuine warmth that made her betrayal of her former country even more disturbing. "Colonel Volkov has asked me to brief you on your next assignment. We're expanding operations to target veterans in the Pacific Northwest, and your success here has earned you a leadership role in that expansion." Maya nodded with apparent enthusiasm while activating the concealed recording device that had been documenting every conversation with her handlers. "I'm ready for whatever assignment you think is appropriate. This work has given me more satisfaction than anything I did during my military service." Walsh smiled and activated a tablet that displayed a detailed map of military installations and veteran communities in Washington State and Oregon. "We've identified 43 high-value targets in the region, all veterans with specialized knowledge that could be valuable to our clients. Your role will be to develop psychological profiles and recruitment strategies for the most promising candidates." As Walsh outlined the expansion of the recruitment operation, Maya felt a mixture of relief and urgency. Relief because the extensive scope of what Walsh was describing would provide the final evidence needed to justify decisive action against the entire network. Urgency because she realized that dozens more veterans were about to be targeted by the same systematic destruction that had been employed against her. "When do we begin the Pacific Northwest operations?" Maya asked, maintaining her cover while mentally calculating how much time remained before her extraction would need to occur. "Immediately," Walsh replied. "We have a flight to Seattle this afternoon, where you'll begin working with our advanced team. The success of this expansion is critical to demonstrating the viability of scaling our recruitment operations to a truly national level." Maya understood that she was being given access to information about the strategic objectives of the entire intelligence operation. The recruitment of individual veterans was apparently just the beginning of a larger campaign designed to systematically compromise American military and intelligence capabilities through the manipulation of discharged personnel. Her phone buzzed again with what appeared to be a routine message about a delayed package delivery, but which she recognized as a coded signal that her extraction team was in position. The timing was perfect, as she now had enough intelligence about the expanded operations to justify shutting down the entire network. "Jennifer, before we leave for Seattle, I need to ask you something that's been bothering me," Maya said, moving closer to ensure optimal audio quality for her recording device. "How many American officials know about these operations? I mean, the level of access you've had to employment databases and veteran records suggests cooperation from people pretty high up in the government." Walsh's expression became more serious as she considered how much to reveal to someone she believed to be a fully committed asset. "Maya, you've proven your loyalty and effectiveness, so I'll be honest with you. Our success has been possible because we have sympathetic contacts in several federal agencies, including Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense, and even elements within the intelligence community itself." The revelation that the recruitment operation had penetrated federal agencies at high levels was the final piece of intelligence that Maya needed to complete her mission. She activated her emergency extraction signal by sending what appeared to be a routine response to the package delivery message. "That's incredible," Maya said, maintaining her cover while preparing for the chaos that would begin within minutes. "I had suspected something like that, but to know that we have allies within the American government makes me much more confident about our long-term success." Walsh nodded with satisfaction, clearly pleased that her trust in Maya was being validated. "The beauty of this operation is that we're not fighting against American interests. We're working with Americans who understand that their government has failed its own people. Veterans like yourself, officials who have been passed over for promotion, business leaders who have been hampered by regulations. We're creating a coalition of people who have legitimate grievances against the current system." Maya realized that Walsh genuinely believed her own propaganda about building a coalition of disaffected Americans. The psychological manipulation extended not just to the recruited veterans, but to the American officials who had been convinced that their cooperation served legitimate purposes rather than foreign intelligence objectives. The sound of helicopters approaching the hotel interrupted their conversation. Walsh moved to the window with confusion, clearly not expecting any aerial activity in their vicinity. Maya used her momentary distraction to position herself near the exit while activating the final phase of her extraction protocol. "What's happening?" Walsh asked, her professional instincts finally alerting her that something was wrong with the situation. "What's happening is that your recruitment operation just ended," Maya said, dropping her cover identity and speaking with the authority of someone who had never actually been compromised. "I'm Sergeant Maya Chen, United States Army, and you're all under arrest for espionage and conspiracy against the United States." Walsh's face went through a series of expressions as she processed the implications of Maya's revelation. Shock, anger, and finally, a grudging respect for the complexity of the counterintelligence operation that had just concluded. "How long have you been working against us?" Walsh asked as the sound of tactical teams entering the hotel grew louder. "From the beginning," Maya replied. "Every meeting, every conversation, every piece of intelligence you thought you were gathering was actually being used to map your entire network. The 47 veterans you targeted, the federal officials you corrupted, the business leaders you compromised, we know about all of them." The hotel room door burst open as members of an international law enforcement team entered with weapons drawn. Maya identified herself and provided the authentication codes that confirmed her identity as an undercover operative. As Walsh and Colonel Volkov were taken into custody, Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the operation was over, satisfaction that justice was being served, and sadness for the veterans whose trust had been betrayed by the recruitment network. But more than anything, she felt a renewed sense of purpose that had been missing from her life since her medical discharge. General Morrison appeared in the doorway as the arrests were being completed. "Outstanding work, Sergeant Chen. Your intelligence has enabled us to recover all 14 previously recruited veterans and arrest more than 60 people involved in the recruitment network. This operation will serve as a model for counterintelligence activities for years to come." Maya smiled as she realized that her military service hadn't ended with her medical discharge. It had simply evolved into a different kind of mission, one that allowed her to protect fellow veterans while serving her country in ways she had never imagined possible. "General, I assume this means my civilian employment problems have been resolved," she asked with the first genuine humor she had felt in months. "Sergeant Chen, if you're interested, we have several career opportunities available that would allow you to continue this kind of work. Operations Shepherd's Watch is being expanded into a permanent program, and we need people with your skills and experience to protect veterans from future recruitment attempts." Maya looked out the window at Prague, thinking about the journey that had brought her from a desperate veteran struggling with civilian life to an undercover operative who had just completed one of the most successful counterintelligence missions in recent history. The civilian life she had been trying to build had been an illusion, but the military service she thought she had lost had proven to be just the beginning of her real contribution to national security. "General, when do I report for duty?"